We've got Peter.
Where's Peter? Where in the real world are you?
My camera's off. Australia.
Oh, okay.
It's Friday morning here.
All right, we are live. Today is November 27th, which here in the United States is Thanksgiving. So we are expecting a lower than usual turnout, but we will continue as normal. I'm going to go ahead and start introductions. I am Jen Lampton. I am joining from Oakland, California, in close proximity to my kitchen so that I can rescue the pies when the alarm goes off. But that's it. Luke, do you want to go next?
Sure. Luke McCormick in San Ramon, California, also near the kitchen. Nate?
I'm Nate Lampton in Oakland, California. And yeah, we've got some interesting things that have been happening this past week regarding the security release and PHP. So I'm looking forward to talking about those things today. Peter?
Yeah, Peter Anderson from Australia. And yes, quite enjoyed my first security release contribution yesterday, even though it was a bit stressful. So yeah, good to do that.
That's great. So speaking of yesterday's, before we get there, since our last meeting last week, we've had 3 new contributed modules released: term reference, view unpublished, and login allow list. So I want to continue to thank our contributors for making more modules for us, which is great. And we did have a security release yesterday, and we finally got all of our sites updated, including the localized website, which is something that we almost always forgot. And I was very excited that we remembered it yesterday and even added it to the documentation so that we will remember it from now on. So that was the only thing going on, I think, with our websites. But Nate, let me turn it over to you to talk about releases.
Yeah, so Backdrop 117.4 was released yesterday. As Peter said, that was a security release, and it was released very late, for which, if you are a site owner, I sympathize, and I think it's fair to apologize. I apologize that we had to release that yesterday, the day before a holiday in the United States. We were coordinating with Drupal, who was coordinating with a third-party library, the Tar Archive library. So there's an upstream fix in that library, which Drupal then deployed, that then we also deployed just to be in sync with everybody. So the new version came out yesterday. It did include a couple of minor fixes, but for the most part, it was just the security release. 116.6 also came out if you're running the previous version of Backdrop. That also includes that fix. And yeah, it was. I was excited to have that release put together because I didn't have to do any of the tasks. BW Panda took all of the core committer tasks and made both of the minor releases or bug fix releases. Jen was primarily doing the coordination, but that was really great to be able to stand by and have another core committer run the entire process of making not 1 but 2 releases. So thanks, Peter, for your volunteering there, and great job putting those things together yesterday. Let's see, 117.5. So since we released 117.4 yesterday, that security fix, everything got bumped over to 117.5, the outstanding bugs that we're working on getting fixed. One of the notable issues that we've had since 117.2 was released, that's where we added support for MySQL 8, is that CiviCRM's views integration broke with that change. The issue is 4745. In that issue, if you're using CiviCRM with Backdrop, or in this case, it actually is not a problem specific to CiviCRM, but if you're using settings.php table prefixes to switch between multiple databases, then that's where this particular problem occurs. So you can do kind of a little hack in settings.php, and you've been able to do this in every version of Drupal that I can recall, that you could use a database name in your table prefixes, and it would basically make it so you would use multiple databases on a single install of Backdrop. And so CiviCRM is dependent upon that to switch between the CiviCRM database and the Backdrop database, and that kind of sharding no longer works after the MySQL 8 support. So there is a workaround that is in that issue. You can add backticks to your table prefixes, and then it works. So there is a little bit of a workaround, but we'd like that not to be necessary. So the approaches that we have there is a pull request, but it needs work. There's various suggestions about how we could solve this. Drupal 7 still doesn't have MySQL 8 support. They haven't committed to their equivalent patch yet, but it is suggested that perhaps we take that approach. The Drupal 7 patch is a bit more conservative, yet more tedious to maintain than the Backdrop approach. In Backdrop, we just tried to add backticks around all table names everywhere, and Drupal 7 is making a whitelist, an allow list of words that need to be escaped. But that list is really long. It's like over 100 words. And so maintaining that seems like it would be tedious. As MySQL changes in the future, we'd need to continue adding different words to the allow list. So kind of an annoying change that it would be nice not to need to do that. But any ideas, if anybody's out there, for solving this problem of escaping table names? That issue, 4745, currently needs some brainstorming as to how we can best solve that problem. Let's see, next up, adding support for PHP 8. Hosif made an issue for this just a couple of days ago. The issue is 4772. Highly relevant because today PHP 8 was released. And so brand new version of PHP out there. It looks like generally PHP 8 doesn't have too big of a compatibility issues with previous versions, but definitely some changes are necessary. But it does look like so far that any changes that we're required to make are largely backwards compatible. So same sort of thing, that just they tighten the bolts down a little bit again as to things that you probably shouldn't have been doing, you're not allowed to do anymore. So so we need a pull request for that. We haven't even really started it other than saying it would be nice to have this. Several people, including myself, are dependent upon Lando for doing their Backdrop testing, and Lando doesn't have PHP 8 support yet. So we have a little bit of a chain of events there that for some people, they might need their upstream environments to be updated so that they can easily test that system.
Do you know if there was some logical reason they chose to release a major version of the software on Thanksgiving?
I do not.
Do they always release on Thursdays? Or like, did it just happen to roll and they didn't notice, or did they pick that out as being? It just seems strange.
I don't know. Maybe it's tradition to release PHP on major holidays, which wouldn't surprise me. But it's not like it was a surprise. Like, it's been coming for a long time now. So.
Right.
All right. So let's see. Other issues that we have here that are relatively new. Fixing field set CSS, collapsible field set CSS in particular, issue 4766. A recent version of Backdrop, I can't remember if it was 117.2 or 117.3. We added some changes to the styling on field sets to make them work better on mobile. And we have a couple of regressions that cropped up from that. We already made one fix to it. And that fix was in 117.4, or sorry, 117.3, I guess. But there's still yet more issues. There's a very minor one that sometimes the bottom border of things is missing on field sets. So issue 4766 covers that. There's multiple screenshots demonstrating what the problem looks like and where it occurs. We currently need a pull request to fix that issue. Field set styling has always been really messy. So more extensive testing would be great to get that one figured out for real. Let's see, something got fixed this week. Missing htaccess rules for PHP 7, issue 4752. We add certain rules in htaccess to configure PHP, set some variables that otherwise you have to set them before PHP actually starts executing. So we had some settings that were specifically set for if running PHP is PHP 5. We added matching rules for PHP 7. In the very near future, I suppose we'll probably have to do the same for PHP 8. But still, nice to get that small issue fixed. Let's see, next up is setting a reasonable max input vars, a PHP variable, issue 3824. That issue currently needs work. Jen, you've been doing a lot of work on that issue. Do you have anything that you'd like to add about it?
No, it looks like the current pull request that I filed was sort of a proof of concept based on how WebForm handled the problem. And the WebForm code doesn't exactly work for core, so I sort of fudged it a little bit. So if we do want to go that route, the pull request is going to need some work.
Yeah, and what that does is, doesn't it throw a warning or something like that when you're on a form that you try to submit?
Yeah, so when you're on a form, it'll count the number of form element children, and if that number is within 5% of your max input vars value, it'll put a yellow error message on the form that says this form isn't going to work properly, please do whatever, and then links you to the documentation page. And then if you submit the form, it throws a red error message saying this form has not submitted properly, and it logs it to Watchdog that there was a problem with the form.
Interesting. On how much overhead do you think that adds?
I don't
Counting
know.
up the form children. Okay.
So the way that WebForm did it was very complicated and probably accurate. And I imagine that that would have some overhead. The way I did it was not accurate. And so it probably has less overhead. So I'm not really sure how much we want to worry about that. I did look pretty extensively at the form API, and there are some other points in the form build process where we might already have that number that we could be a little smarter about it, or if we like stored that in like a static cache or something and then retrieved it at the point where we want to set the message, we wouldn't have to count everything twice. But I decided that I wasn't going to start doing that until we were sure we wanted this solution. So yeah, there are potential places for cleanup on performance side of things.
Great. And so the thinking there is that instead of adding an error or warning on the status report, that we just have that message. So is that right?
Yeah, it seems like most people don't want to know about the problem until it happens rather than being able to prevent it from happening, which seems a little weird to me. We are able to set the value for limited cases, like when you have mod PHP for PHP 5 or PHP 7 and you're on Apache, that problem has been solved because we've set it in htaccess. But when we are not able to do those things, we are not, what I think we should do is tell people like, hey, Backdrop isn't configured properly because of their server configuration or whatever, and let them fix it. But it looks like everybody wants to say, let the site fail. And then after it fails, we'll be able to tell them why it failed. So I don't know, it's still labeled needs more feedback, but it does look like most people would rather have the failure than prevent it. So if that's what we want to do, it's fine.
I think it's not so much that we wanted it to fail, it's more as if people didn't want to have a warning in the status report page that is always there, that if they choose not like to ignore it or that it's not an issue for their particular site. They just didn't want this constant yellow warning there all the time.
Yeah, I don't think that's an issue. I mean, if you choose to run the wrong PHP version or something, you could probably also get away with it. But I still think that it's important that people know that they're running the wrong PHP version. So yeah, I don't know. It would be good if we could get more voices on that too. And I don't know how many people have looked at it other than people that are already on it, but I would like to.
Is it a user interface question for the status page, or is it a question of sort of like something somewhere between warning and error?
Yeah,
like,
so we only have a couple of statuses for that message. Like it could be an info message, which is not, like just like, you know, what version of CKEditor are you running or something. It'll just print on the page. And then we have an error, which would throw a red dot on your site that's like, hey, your server's misconfigured, please fix it now, which everybody thought was too harsh. And so the compromise was like, well, what if we made it a warning? But now it's a yellow error. So it's not going to bother anyone unless you're on the status report. But on the status report, it is still yellow. And so a lot of people are uncomfortable with the fact that their site will have a yellow error on it if it's not configured properly. But I don't know what the other circumstances are for the yellow errors showing up there and how people are feeling about that. I know we do one for like if you choose not to set your domain name in the settings.php file to prevent it from having like cross-site origin request forgeries or something, it'll throw a yellow error there. And I know a lot of people are comfortable with saying like, I'm accepting the security risks and I'm going to leave that yellow warning there. And I feel like this is comparable, maybe even more dangerous than that, because if you're comfortable with allowing this problem on your site, you're basically saying at some point someone's going to submit a form and it's not going to work and I'm okay with that. And that's different than like a choice you've specifically made to not, I don't know. So it would be good to figure out how we want to handle this. Another thing we could do, and it's a little bit more complicated, is that we could trigger the warning at the first failure. Or even make it an error at that point, right? Where if your site is humming along perfectly fine with the misconfiguration until some, I don't know, form gets in a certain number of elements on it or whatever, you made a big web form. At that point, we know your site's failed and it could be a red dot that's like, hey, something's wrong. And if we didn't do anything until there, I mean, I think it would be okay. I don't know. I just feel like for people who are building sites and know that this is a problem, it's super frustrating to be like, why, like, you have
why
to
did you tell me?
Yeah, right. Like
right,
you know that this is a configuration, like Backdrop sets this properly when it can. Like, why didn't you just tell me to do it myself? And then you can, and you don't have to worry about the problem. My oven's going off. I'll be right.
Well, the good.
Go ahead, Nate.
Oh, I was going to say, well, some of the good news is that the missing HT access rules for PHP 7, that issue that I just mentioned before this one, 4752, does actually increase the max input vars in HT access if it can. So this issue 3824 is really not about setting the max input vars because we're already doing that now. It's about reporting if it's not high enough. So we should probably just retitle that issue. But yeah, how we handle it, there are a variety of ways. And I think we can move on from that one. Let's see. I think that these other issues, the ones we have on the normal list, there haven't been any updates on them. So I think I'll probably skip over the remaining items. 118. 118 is the next version of Backdrop that will be coming out January 15th with feature freeze on January 1st. That means that, we've got about a month before feature freeze for 118 rolls around. Let's see. Normally, we would have advocates talk about each one of their issues. There aren't a whole lot of people here this week because of the holiday, although Indigo Zella did say that the WebP support issue, issue 4509, is still in the same state that it needs code review but it has gotten some good positive testing, and so we still need somebody to move that one into an RTBC state if they believe that it's ready to go. Let's see, Peter, you're also here to talk about the breakpoint for the menu block, issue 4663. Could you give us an update on that issue?
Yep. So previously there's a pull request that needs review and testing. Indigo Zella tested it and says it works for her. And then Greg came in with a few suggestions, and this is where we need some feedback from other people as to how we want to do this. So the pull request adds a new field, min width, where you can specify the width, like media query width at which the menu changes to a hamburger pop-up thingy. So the current pull request just has a text field where you can type in, say, 500 px for 500 pixels or something like that. Greg suggested changing it to two separate fields, one for the integer value and then one as a drop down to select pixels or EMs or whatever. A few of us thought it might be a bit too complex, but we're wanting feedback from others as to whether that would be better or not from a usability point of view, I guess. So that's one thing we need feedback on. The other one is on the where we have the existing checkbox to make the hamburger menu appear on small screens. Someone suggested it might be good to have a link to the menu settings where you can set that breakpoint. So we added in the description text a link to the menu settings page, but then people worked out that you can't access that unless you have a certain permission. So then we tried to wrap that link in a permission so that if you have the permission, you can see the link, and if you don't have the permission, the text is still there telling you that this can be configured, but you then just need to ask whoever's managing your site to give you permission or to change it or whatever. However, the code to like the translation code and putting the link in there conditionally based on whether you have a permission or not is a bit yucky. So Greg tried to suggest a way to make it a bit cleaner code, but that means that that whole sentence is removed if you don't have the right permission, which means you don't actually get to see that that's an option. So again, we're just wanting feedback there as to how to make that cleaner code if possible, but also still allowing, or do we need to allow people to see a link if they can't access it, that sort of thing. So a few issues there we want feedback on, but otherwise, yeah, the pull request still just needing people to test it and make sure it doesn't break anything.
All right, great. That is a kind of it. We also have these other issues, but we're not going to go over them today. We're taking a holiday. And initiatives, documentation, telemetry, and ready to wear. Luke said he's okay passing on that today. So is there anything else? I guess, I think that this is kind of what we had discussed is, what it was we're going to cover today, keep it kind of short. Do you guys have anything you guys would like to bring up?
I have a major feature request I thought of this week. I've been working with Tim on Simplo, putting up one of my sites and doing more complicated things involving configuration management than I've done in the past. And I find myself desperately wishing that Backup and Migrate handled configure, CMI stuff as well. So I'm just kind of curious, like, has that come up? Should I try to write that? Is it hard? Is it doable? Is it a thing?
I've also wished for that. I don't think it's hard because we already have the UI for configuration management. We just need to trigger those same events from the Backup and Migrate contrib module. So
yeah, I don't think that would be hard.
I think there might even be an issue for it already.
Yeah, conceptually, it's pretty simple. I mean, there's just JSON files that should go along with the database dump, right? It might be a little bit weird. I'm sure Backup and Migrate does a lot of weird things because, like, overwriting the database is that you probably have to go outside of Backdrop's APIs to do a lot of that stuff. And I think that would be the same for configuration, that you wouldn't want to trigger the normal, like, hey, I'm importing the configuration right now because the database is already definitively up to date. So there's no synchronization that is necessary. You really just need to delete all the config files, replace them all with the backed up ones, and that's it. So I don't think that it's difficult. It just needs to go, but it probably will need to work outside of Backdrop's normal APIs, because you won't want to actually run a config sync. You'll just want to replace all of the files because it already matches the database. But yeah, I don't think that it's hard. An alternative to that, of course, is there's also an open issue that moves configuration into the database, and that would also make it so that there wouldn't be any config files to move. It would just be in the database in the first place. So that's an alternative if you were interested in pursuing that route.
Yeah.
But
No,
I think
I-
backup and migrate, just working with config files, that would be valuable in itself.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. I just didn't know if it was, where it was, and then like, oh yeah, half the time I ask a question like that, right, the answer is we released that in 2017, and I'm like, oh, okay. So that's definitely a thing that could be done. All right, fair enough. That's all I need at this point then.
Yeah, I think for some people, I know the way that we manage backdropcms.org and our little family of backdrop sites there is that configuration is all stored in Git. And so it's not really quite as important, I think, for us. But yeah, well, we also have backups automated. So yeah, it's we're in a little bit of a different world over there. But yeah, I think maybe it's one of these things. It's like the value is greater for end users, those who use backup and migrate, than it is for the little bit the more experienced developers who have other systems that provide their backups and configuration backups and all of that stuff.
Yeah. Well, I just in the past I've discovered, like I've been in situations where backup and migrate is used as like a version control system fairly aggressively to handle all sorts of things that it wasn't really intended to, and it's handled it well enough that's what some fairly substantial projects I've seen it worked on. So that would seem worthwhile to explore that as an option.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, I do believe that backup and migrate is the most popular backdrop module. It's installed apparently on just about half of all backdrop sites. So there you go. It's a high impact place to make contributions.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. Well, anything else?
Some things to bring up. Some things have been getting a bit of discussion lately, and I think something that we need to make a decision on, hopefully sooner than later, is the whole changing CSS, non-breaking backwards compatible way sort of thing. So there's an issue about it, which we've discussed lots of options, and then Tim opened an issue in the different issue queue, I think. Yeah, the backdrop cms.org issue queue, just more of like an overview of how we're going to make this decision, whether we take it to the PMC or leave people to discuss a bit longer or whatever. But yeah, just thinking that might be good to just mention and get either more feedback on, or just make a decision so we can move on, because it sort of seems to be holding up a lot of issues, not knowing how best to add or change CSS in core.
I think that same thing applies to markup for core too, because if we do get the freedom to, start fixing stuff, there might be a lot of stuff on the front end that we want to update.
Like field sets.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't have any thoughts to add on that at this point. Yeah, we've had several discussions about it, and I haven't thought of anything new since then.
I think maybe we just need to excuse me, send it up to the PMC to make a decision on what do we believe in terms of backward compatibility regarding this issue, and then how do we address it, and then other issues can sort of move forward a bit more. But yeah, it seems like we're just currently in like a standstill of like no new ideas coming forward and people gridlocked as to what the best course of action is.
Okay, well, let's wrap it up. It is almost turkey time here in California, so we're going to we're going to close up for today, I think, and go and enjoy our Thanksgivings. Hope everybody out there has a great holiday, if it's a holiday, and if not, I hope it's a great Thursday and or Friday. I guess, Peter, sorry. And yeah, thanks. We'll see you guys again next week, and we'll see you guys on the internet and issue queue.